Hi, Kath.
Hi. Sorry, I'm
First,
a few minutes late.
that's okay. Um, First,
Can
just
you hear me?
good morning to everybody. Um, I have met everyone here, but there may be people watching that I haven't met. And in case they don't know me, my name is Joan Hedeman Mickey, and I'm a proud member of Third Church and a member of Third Church I-Peace Committee. And it's with a great pleasure and love that I get to introduce my sister, Catherine Heeman Habib, who's with us by Zoom from Fairfax, Virginia. Briefly, I just want to say that my first time in the Middle East was in 1973 to spend a large part of the summer with Kathy, who was living and working in Beirut at the time. That was my first time to go into a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon. Kathy had studied religion and political science and Arabic in college while in Minnesota and at the American University of Beirut on her junior year abroad. And she had returned to Lebanon to live, work, and then study theology in Lebanon. That summer, we also got to meet the Pope of the Coptic Church of Cairo through our father, who was coming to meet with him and other theological leaders concerning the issues of how do Christians begin to understand each other in different parts of the world. Our father at the time was the theologian in residence for the Presbyterian Church, whose offices were headquartered at 475 Riverside Drive in New York City. And at the end of his life, he started and ran a project from my parents' home, actually, in New Jersey, called the Global Theology Project. I got to meet Jonathan Kutab, who will be with us here next week, in 1989. My husband and I were part of a Presbyterian and medical concerns study group, and we met Jonathan in his office in East Jerusalem, and his office was called his Al-Haq Law in the Service of Humanity. So I am very excited that we are able to have him here start next week. My now sadly deceased brother-in-law, Gabriel Habib, who I believe was at Third Church once in the past, was the head of the Middle East Council of Churches for more than 20 years. And he worked with Jonathan Kutab on various projects throughout his life. So, without taking more time from my sister, I would ask that we have a prayer together. Gracious God, we ask that this time together educate us to strive to be faithful to your call for justice for all your children. This we ask in the name of the Prince of Peace, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Okay, Kath.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Joni. Thanks for that nice introduction. And thank you to the committee for the invitation to speak leading into your time with Jonathan Kutab. That's really quite an honor. Joni asked me, and she's covered some of this already, Joni asked me to share some thoughts because of my history and work in the Middle East that began when I spent my junior year abroad at the American University in 1967-68, right in the aftermath of the June 67 war. After graduating from Macalester College with a major in religion and political science, I worked in the Student World Relations Office of the Presbyterian Church. I returned to Beirut and worked in the Ecumenical Youth and Student Office for the Middle East in 1972. My late husband, Gabriel Habib, was very active in the churches in the Middle East, and as a young man, he was leader of the Orthodox Youth Movement. He was a member of the Orthodox Church of Antioch, probably the oldest Christian church in the world. The Orthodox Youth Movement was a renewal movement of the Church of Antioch, whose patriarchate is still in Damascus and whose members largely live in Syria and Lebanon. He was General Secretary of Syndesmos, which is the World Fellowship of Orthodox Youth Movements. And later, he was the Middle East Regional Secretary for the World Student Christian Federation. And then he became the longest serving to date General Secretary of the Middle East Council of Churches. His tenure with the MECC was during the Lebanese Civil War, when we lived there in Beirut, and it included the years 1980 to 82, when the Israelis invaded Lebanon. Our two daughters, Anna and Maria, were born in Beirut in 1980 and 82, and I worked for the MECC editing its English publications and accompanying visitors from abroad who came to get an understanding of what was happening. Jonathan is a good friend. He and Mubarak Awad of Nonviolence International provided my husband office space when we moved to the United States from Beirut in 1997. At the reception after my husband's funeral 2 years ago, Jonathan spontaneously offered a beautiful eulogy. I will forever be grateful for his loving gesture. As you know by now, Jonathan is co-founder with Rajesh Hadi of the first Palestinian human rights group, Al-Haq. It's interesting to know that Al-Haq, meaning the truth in Arabic, is one of the names of God in the Quran. And in the Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition, the Holy Spirit is called the Spirit of Truth. Al-Haq is the Palestinian affiliate of the International Commission of Jurists. It's one of the first human rights organizations in the contemporary Arab world. The defense of human rights is one of the main tenets of our Christian faith, whose historical origin, along with the other two great monotheistic religions of Judaism and Islam, is in Palestine. Today, I will try to comment on how the churches historically have played in the landscape of human rights that Jonathan will describe for you. I bring this up because the West, beginning in the time leading up to the Crusades, has taken on the mindset that it is, quote unquote, the Christian world, and that therefore, quote unquote, the Holy Land belongs to them. The renowned Palestinian scholar and intellectual Edward Said describes this when he speaks in depth of culture and imperialism. He writes, "Every single empire in its official discourse has said that it is not like all the others, that its circumstances are special, that it has a mission to enlighten, civilize, bring order and democracy, and that it uses force only as a last resort. And sadder still, there always is a chorus of willing intellectuals to say calming words about benign or altruistic empires, as if one should trust the evidence one shouldn't trust the evidence of one's eyes watching the destruction and the misery and death brought by the latest mission civilisatrice. Today, we see an extreme of this mentality in Christian nationalism and in Zionism, which are playing a significant role in the empire the new US administration is attempting to construct. This attitude, which has roots back to the Crusades that resisted the rise of Islam in the East, and later European colonialism and then American capitalist imperialism, has meant, among many other things, that Eastern Christianity is little known or understood in the West. The Crusaders not only went to war with the so-called quote-unquote Muslim infidels, but it is little known that they also fought against the Eastern Christians, considering it their calling to correct and educate the quote-unquote ignorant Eastern churches. You will learn some of this if you read the diaries of 19th century missionaries. Today, Islam continues to be vilified in the West, as you know. Muslims are labeled as quote-unquote terrorists, and Arab Christians are kept invisible, or when visible, are portrayed as ancient in a pejorative sense and out of touch with today's world. And in line with this view, the occupation of Palestine is portrayed as a Jewish-Muslim conflict. So in brief, the Arab world, with its rich history, heritage, and cultural diversity, continues to be stereotyped and vilified in a West whose essential interest is in obtaining the region's wealth. And sadly, Western Christians have largely remained both ignorant and silent on this issue. The Reverend Mundher Isaac from Bethlehem, who has become well known for the symbolism of the manger scene of Jesus in the rubble, has raised questions about this silence of Western Christians in the face of a televised broadcast and ongoing genocide. I believe at the root of this silence, he feels, is this history of West-East relations that we are not free of. Jonathan's human rights advocacy is central to resolving this, yet it lives more in the secular space. How can we in the churches and the ecumenical movement support human rights advocacy by adding another important dimension to it? The ecumenical movement and interfaith dialogue have played a role in reversing these attitudes, but there is much more to be done. The battle for the implementation of human rights that Jonathan wages is essential in liberating the West and the East from the grip of this historical struggle to dominate that is still far from reaching a peaceful and just resolution. Allow me to quote some additional words of wisdom from Said's Culture and Imperialism. There seems no reason, except for fear and prejudice, to keep insisting on separation and distinctiveness as if that was all human life was about. Survival, in fact, is about the connections between things. In Eliot's phrase, he's referring to T.S. Eliot, reality cannot be deprived of the, quote, other echoes that inhabit the garden, unquote. It is more rewarding and more difficult to think concretely and sympathetically, contrapuntally about others than only about, quote unquote, us. But this also means not trying to rule others, not trying to classify them or put them in hierarchies. Above all, not constantly reiterating how, quote unquote, our culture or country is number one. The churches can and should play a role in this liberation. The first step before we form opinions about others is to examine ourselves. With regard to the involvement of the churches of the West in the struggle for human rights in Palestine and the wider Middle East, we might begin asking ourselves, how much do we know about Arab Christians? Do we know any Arab Christians? Have we studied the history of the churches and Christianity in the region beyond what we read in the Bible? Do we know anything about the churches and Christians of Palestine in the wider Arab world? Can we familiarize ourselves with the relationship of Christians and Muslims in Arab society? Do we know anything about interfaith dialogue in the Arab world? There is a lot to learn. Christians are a small minority in the Middle East that includes, besides the Arab countries, Iran, Turkey, and Cyprus. They are estimated to be 5% or so of the population. Cyprus is the only country with a Christian majority of about 76%. The large majority of Christians in the region belong to the Orthodox traditions: Byzantine, Armenian, Syriac, Coptic, Chaldean, Assyrian. The largest single church is the Coptic Orthodox Church. Most of its members live in Egypt and number about 10 million, or 10% or so of the population. The next largest group of churches are the Catholic churches: Eastern Rite, Western Rite, and Maronite. The Protestant churches are a small minority dating from the Protestant missions of the 19th century. They include Anglicans, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Methodists, and Baptists. Just as a side note, be aware that Presbyterians and Lutherans call themselves evangelical, but that's not to be confused with the conservative American evangelicals. The oldest churches are the Orthodox, whose origins date back to the very beginnings of Christianity. The largest number of Middle East Christians living in the United States are from Orthodox traditions. Orthodox churches in North America that have historical ties with Palestine are the Orthodox Church of Antioch, related to the Patriarchate of Antioch, headquartered in Damascus, and the Greek Orthodox Church, related to the Patriarchate of Jerusalem. If you attend worship at these churches, maybe there's one in your neighborhood, especially the Church of Antioch, you will likely meet people of Palestinian heritage. The churches of the region have, the churches of the region have taken important steps to raise awareness about their heritage and their role in advocating for human rights. One such important effort was the formation of the Middle East Council of Churches. In 1974, the Orthodox and Protestant churches in the region came together, forming the MECC. You can find it at mecc.org, headquartered in Beirut, Lebanon. My late husband was the negotiating secretary for the Orthodox churches in the formation of the council. And under his leadership in 1990, the Catholic churches joined, making the MECC a body representing all the Christians of the region, the only regional ecumenical body in the world representing all three major Christian confessions. MECC, with 27 member churches representing the 12 to 15 million Christians in the region, is a tangible expression of the Christian presence. Its mission is working towards the unification of visions and perspectives of Eastern churches, especially on issues related to Christian presence and witness in the Middle East and to Muslim-Christian relations. The Council sees itself as a bridge between Eastern Christians, a bridge between the Christians and people of other religions in the region, especially Muslims, maintaining a dialogue of love and a life of centuries-old inherited partnership between Christians and Muslims. MECC is also a bridge between the Middle East churches and the churches in other parts of the world. It actively participates in all contemporary worldwide ecumenical activities. This is interesting for our subject. The oldest program of MECC, established before even the actual formation of the current council, is its Department on Service to Palestine Refugees. At its origin, this was an ad hoc ecumenical effort by churches in the region and international churches to help the Palestinian refugees numbering 750,000 displaced in 1948 by the Zionist occupation of Palestine and the declaration of the State of Israel. Later, the Department on Service to Palestine Refugees was incorporated into the MECC and today runs programs for the Palestine refugees, Christians and Muslims in Lebanon, Jordan, Jerusalem, and the West Bank, the Galilee, and Gaza. You can find it at dspr.org. One could say legitimately that this humanitarian endeavor was at the very root of the ecumenical movement in the region. The Gaza branch of DSPR, in the current horrific circumstances, is focusing on health services and food and water distribution. The churches in Gaza, one Orthodox and one Catholic, are housing about 570 people who lost their homes. It's estimated that only about 600 Christians remain in Gaza, down from almost 2,000 a couple of years ago. I might just add here that during the time of the Roman Empire, Gaza was a very lively and important center of Christianity. Certainly, the churches in Gaza and the West Bank and the Middle East region are committed to helping all those in need during these increasingly horrific times. As churches in the West, we must make every effort to remain in touch with them, to understand what is needed, and to support their efforts to feed the hungry, heal the sick, take care of orphans and widows. It is not only a matter of defending human rights in the abstract, but a matter of getting to know each other as persons and as neighbors in this violent world. We should advocate for peace and justice vis-a-vis our government and call out its major role in the violence killing thousands in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria. As U.S. citizens, we have that responsibility. But as churches in the West, what can we do? We have a unique ability to support our sister churches in the Middle East. To begin, we must get to know them. We must cultivate ears, quote unquote, to hear. This is the land where our faith originated. We belong to it. It doesn't, quote unquote, belong to us. A tenet of our faith is to love your neighbor as yourself. So this includes getting to know the churches who live where our faith originated. It means asking their forgiveness for historically being part of a colonialist movement that sought to dominate them and seeks to dominate them, I might add. If we do this and follow the lead of the Christians and churches indigenous to Palestine and the surrounding lands who are suffering the consequences of this dreadful violence perpetrated by Western domination, we can begin to shed the cultural and political imperialist mentality we have inherited living in the West and enter into a living relationship of truth, understanding, and love in a joint effort for a shared world, a true oikumene. Thank you again for inviting me. I wish you a very good visit with Jonathan. He'll be able to tell you firsthand what's happening on the ground in Palestine and the challenges the church there are facing daily. Thank you.
Kathy, don't go away.
No, I won't.
No, there probably are questions here, so anyone?
Well,
Jim?
yeah, I'll start. Kathy, hi, congratulations
Hi.
on starting to train the next generation of advocates. I see the grandbaby online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm young. But I wonder if you'd say a few words about what your time in Beirut and Lebanon was like personally for you. What was the situation then? Lebanon has gone through various times of civil war and relative quiet. So what was the status then, and what were you doing personally while your husband has his position? So just to expand on
Okay.
introduction of it more, if you could. Good question.
Sure, sure. Just a quick note, when my first time there, I was a student at the American University of Beirut right after the June War. The campus was extremely active politically, lots of student demonstrations, lots of in opposition to the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. So I was well aware of of what was happening, and have a picture of myself demonstrating down the street in front of the main gate of the university. Later, when we were married and we lived in Beirut, where MECC is headquartered, it was a wonderful time because there was great excitement among the churches about forming the MECC, about being together in an ecumenical fellowship of getting to know more about each other, frankly. We it got difficult, very difficult, when the Lebanese Civil War started. And the Council of Churches had a program to help those displaced and affected by the war. I was helping with the editing and publication of MECC's English language publications. And those were just, we didn't have internet then, so we typed it out and mailed and sent our newsletter. We the churches were they had a program to help the displaced, a joint program. It was a difficult time. My two daughters were born during the Israeli invasion, and they came up from the south and entered Beirut. I had to go with Maria and Anna, who was a little older than little Gabby there. We had to actually sort of escape to a part of Beirut that was safer than where the MECC headquarters was. And Gabby, my husband, stayed at the headquarters and manned the response of the churches to that situation. At that time, the Palestinian leadership, almost all of it, was housed in Beirut, actually in the neighborhood where we were living, near AUB. The PLO, the leaders of the different political parties, and that was a time when the Palestinian leadership had among its people very important intellectuals and thinkers. Unfortunately, and that's probably one reason of the Israeli invasion. It was also during the time of the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. I remember the day that happened, and the churches had medical volunteers who were working in the refugee camps among the refugees who had been there since 1948, living constantly in a refugee camp environment. There were medical volunteers working in the camps. They were from all over the world, and they were sponsored by MECC. The day that happened, I was in the office, and people came rushing in saying, "There's something going on in the camps. There's something going on in the camps." And those who were on duty in the Gaza hospital and other hospitals and clinics in the camps were rounded up by the Phalange and the under the direction of the Israelis. They were going to be killed, but the Israelis gave the Phalange orders, "Don't shoot them, they're foreigners." And then they were made to leave the camps, and the massacre occurred. So it was a difficult time. If you have any specific questions, I can answer. And it's just, this is even worse in Gaza, if you can say worse about massacres and genocides, I'm not sure. So it goes on, and the world needs to find a way to end the violence, obviously.
Any other questions of those of us who are here or online? I have one, Kath. In our mighty here, and our context. I'm so grateful that you were willing to do this so that we could connect with Christians in Fairfax, Virginia, who care about this. So you would say something about your church, and if you see ways that we might connect moving forward, even the two churches here, to do some of the things you're talking about.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I belong now to the Orthodox Church of Antioch. Not because I married an Orthodox. I joined the church before that. I think I credit, I don't know if credit is the right word. I think my theological training, which largely came from my father, led me to finding my home in the Orthodox Church. We belong to the St. Peter and Paul Orthodox Church of Antioch in Potomac, Maryland. You can find them online. We're part of about 300 parishes in the Archdiocese of North America. Recently, we, along with two other parishes, another one in Maryland and one in Virginia, and also an Orthodox church that's a member of the OCA, which is Orthodox Churches of America. We formed a group called Orthodox Christians for Palestine, just to raise the visibility to the Christians in the region, and to promote what I advocated it for in a way in my talk, that we learn, we be in touch with and in fellowship with the churches in the region during all the time, but especially during these days when they're undergoing such suffering and are trying to minister to their community, Christian and Muslim and others, secular people. So I don't have it before me, maybe Anna does. We have a link. I think even if you Google Orthodox Christians for Palestine, you'll find a platform on the internet where we post things. We also post on Instagram and have a Facebook page. We are not really an organization. We're just a movement to advocate for the things that basically that I presented in my talk. And we'd be happy to explore, how we can be in fellowship. And we're members of Churches for Middle East Peace. We collaborate with Sabeel, Friends of Sabeel, North America. So there are ways that we can remain circles and through which we can remain in touch.
If I
Does
can,
that help, Joni?
Mom, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Hi,
Anna's a member
everybody.
too.
The Orthodox Christians for Palestine movement that Mom is talking about, I'll try to put the link. We don't have a website yet, but we have a link to some of our, like our sign up sheet where you can sign up for our newsletter. I just want to clarify one thing. We are not the same as the Palestine Orthodox Church of America. So if you Google Orthodox Christians for Palestine, you might get something called the Palestine Orthodox Church of America. That has nothing to do with us. It's a schismatic offshoot that is not
To be
quite authentic.
ignored.
To be ignored. But we are trying to partner with as many churches as we can. We're trying to have coordinate events with Presbyterian churches in particular. We do feel like the Presbyterian Church has a big platform and advocacy, strength, working towards human rights in Palestine. And, you've signed on to the BDS, you've done a lot of important work. We would we want to partner with Presbyterian churches to highlight to amplify the voices of the Christians in the Holy Land, in particular the Orthodox Christians, since that's our faith tradition, and also because the church in Gaza, St. Porphyrios, is an Orthodox church. And so we feel like if in our partnership with Presbyterian churches, we can amplify those voices and really try to work together to help towards human rights in Palestine. So I think events like this are part of what we're trying to do, trying to spread the word to other Presbyterian churches and just kind of have like a raising awareness session about Christians in the Middle East. So thank you, by the way, Aunt Joan, for hosting this, because I think it is very much in line with what we're trying to do as well. So I think if there are other ways we can collaborate and brainstorm together about how we can advance this cause, I think that would be very important. So I'll try to find the link and put it in the chat in just a second.
That was my next question. The other thing, Kath, just to give people a sense of, everyone in our room here is totally frustrated by this current reality. And I think it's fair for me to say that. How easy is it for the people in your group there to even make regular contact with the Christians who are living through live, trying to live through this genocidal scenario. I mean, how easy is it to even have contact?
Well, there are difficulties, of course, but many members of the parishes who are the founders of this have relatives and family in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jerusalem, and you can actually, most of the time call your family or your relatives and talk to them about the situation. Also online, you can like the Orthodox Church of Antioch Patriarchate, the Church of Jerusalem Patriarchate. They have websites and they post some of their activities, and they post statements by church leaders about the ongoing situation. MECC, Middle East Council of Churches, has a weekly newsletter that tries to gather together what all the various churches are doing and saying about this and about other things in their daily life. So, thanks to modern communication, it's, say, easier than when we lived there during the Civil War in Lebanon. So I don't know. I think it's reasonably possible to reach people. The Orthodox churches have something called IOCC, Inter-Orthodox Christian Charities. Through IOCC, our churches, do charitable giving to the projects, the humanitarian work of the churches in the region in the Middle East. They also do charitable work in other places around the world. So it's possible, it's reasonably possible to communicate and to keep abreast of what's going on.
And also through MECC, I think you can, the Middle East Council of Churches, you can connect with a lot of the churches in the region.
There's a new, relatively new, not very, very new, but relatively new endeavor that it's called the Ecumenical Institute for the Middle East. And the people who participate are young adults in the region. Because as you know, I think there's a concern among the churches that Christianity is diminishing, gravely diminishing in the region. And so this institute, an effort to gather, it's a regional institute, it's an effort to gather the young people from all the church traditions in training sessions where they learn about each other's churches, and they meet with Muslim scholars and students and learn more than they may know about Islam. And it's very popular usually. I mean, they can accept, say, in summer sessions run 3 weeks. It's like an academic seminar, and they take turns meeting in different countries, and they need our support. I think it's maybe one of the most important endeavors the churches are undertaking right now. The leadership is very good, and the participation is enthusiastic, I must say. So they also have a website, but I don't know how much of it is I'm trying to remember. Most of it isn't in English, so that wouldn't be too beneficial to you. Anyway, I stay in
Could you
touch
send
with them.
us- Pat, could you send us contact information about that? Because that is a sign of hope in the region that these young people are meeting. And, you know,
Yeah.
when you
Yes.
get that in English.
Mhm. Yeah, they have some things in English. I
That'd
can.
be great. Yeah, the way she just does. Any other, yes, Ralph?
Googling, thank you so much for this seminar, but also the direct, connection here.
Yeah,
But I was just Googling the Middle East Presbyterian Fellowship. Have we had any contact with them? I know they have a chapter in Tucson, and which is where my really good friend Sylvia Thorson Smith, those who've been involved in more light
oh,
matters will know Sylvia
oh,
there. But also I'm kind of curious about Saints Peter and Paul Coptic Orthodox Church
okay.
on West Main Street. And I don't know, that's
I
the
didn't
former
even
Catholic
know
Church,
there was,
Western Catholic
Yeah.
Church, so I'm not sure what's going on there in terms of
Yeah.
Coptic Christians.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for Western Christians, it's interesting and sometimes too long to attend liturgy in an Orthodox church. I think, with some preparation, you might find it an interesting learning activity. There are many Coptic Orthodox who are in the United States, immigrants. By the way, I mean, a lot of Arab Christians and Muslims are quite nervous under the current political climate we're living in.
no. Ralph, go
The
ahead.
other interesting little factoid, my youngest nephew is in Alexandria, Egypt. And he is his accommodation is in the Coptic monastery there.
Oh, yeah.
The section that's reserved for the Pope.
Yeah.
And he knows the Pope, he's met the Pope, and they're sharing, but my nephew is Mennonite. And the Pope there in Alexandria is very interested in peacemaking emphasis of Mennonites and the kinds of degrees that a lot of Mennonites are getting in college in terms of conflict mediation, et cetera. But so, and I'm really kind of curious to understand more about the caliphates and and the patriarchs and how all that works. And in Egypt, there were like two, but I don't know how they're related, or are they like regional kind of things, and maybe that's something we could explore as we understand more about the Coptic.
Well, there's the Patriarchate of Alexandria is the Byzantine tradition, and then there's the Coptic Orthodox, which are the non-Chalcedonian Orthodox, like the Armenians, the Coptics, the Syriacs, who back in the day didn't accept the definition of the Council of Chalcedon. But what else was I going to say? I forgot. If I think of it, I'll bring it up.
This is all very
Thank
really.
you, Ralph.
Sure.
No, but now we know, I mean, I didn't even know there was a Coptic church here in Rochester.
At one point, there was a seminary in Henrietta.
A Coptic,
Small, yeah.
oh,
But
did
they're
you hear
now-
that,
they're
Kathy?
now closed.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure what's going on there, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're getting toward our time.
Well, I want to ask one more. question.
Yeah,
So Catherine, since you know Jonathan Katab better than we do, what questions would you have for him? What should
Well,
be a
I
week
think,
scoring that doesn't come to mind?
excuse me, I've been fighting a flu. Um, yeah, Jonathan, I think you're lucky because he'll just be getting back from spending some time in Palestine on the ground, uh, learning more about the immediate situation. Um, Jonathan himself is Anglican Palestinian. But my guess is he'll be focusing on the human rights issues. Um, um, I I think you all know the kinds of I mean I think he'll be very well equipped to bring you up to date on what's happening and what we're not seeing in our news media, uh, which is always a problem. Um, and about the actions of Palestinian Christians in terms of defending human rights, defending their rights, and how the future is looking uh, to people who live there. Um, I um, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I think you all know. It'll be spontaneous.
I have one.
Yes, Amy.
So, what I read, and I read a lot, it's just all bad news.
Mhm.
And I wonder if you have any good news to share with us. Because these are just dreadful times for Palestinians. They have been, but they continue to be, especially in Gaza, but not just Gaza.
Right.
Terrible things are happening in the West Bank. So, any good news?
Um, I find it's bittersweet news, but I find the resistance or the willingness to maintain their dignity and to resist of the Palestinians who are under attack amazing and inspiring, but at the same time very yeah, unbelievably sad, and just beyond belief, sort of. What is good is that people are helping their neighbors, under the worst of circumstances. And let me add, let's not forget the thousands of Palestinians who are living in refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, in the West Bank, who have been there for 4 or 5 generations. These are like shanty towns with, you know, and they maintain their sense of family. They maintain their cultural heritage, and they haven't given up. Uh, and also, I think on the world stage, more some people, talk about this as the kind of last great anti-colonial struggle. And on the world stage, there's, South Africa brought the case to the International Court. Uh, the Global South is at least speaking up. The dilemma is why can't the world do something about this? Why can't some of what they're saying take form and shape and make it stop? That I don't have an answer. Nobody has a clear answer.
Thank you.
I hate to cut it off, but we have to. Thank you, sister.
Thank you all for listening, being patient.
Yeah, and as you, I can hear, our brother-in-law saying, inshallah, in God's time. And
Yeah,
thank
God
everybody
willing.
for your interest, God willing, yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Carol.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.